Well, thank you very much. It's just terrific to have this honor. I think I'm supposed to, and I will get into a little bit, talk about the difference in my stage and age and when I was in your position and where you are today, but I've already noticed a significant difference. I think back in my day, they would never give you actually formally, legally, until the end of the ceremony rather than at the start of the ceremony, and for fear that we'd all just immediately abandon the room. So credit to you. The University of Toronto has clearly been central to my life. My father taught here. I met my wife here, the center of my life. One of my sons graduated from the University of Toronto, as did two of my daughter-in-laws. Now, my task is to supposedly pass on some wisdom to you to help guide you in the next few decades of your lives. But I have to give you a slight word of caution. When people of my age are candid, they will acknowledge that throughout most of their careers, they didn't really always know what they were doing. They certainly didn't know where they were headed. And the largest contributing factor to their success was clearly luck. But the organizers of today would be a little disappointed if I left it at that, so let me embellish by telling you what I think I've learned in life and how these lessons may apply to you. Two observations underpin my remarks. To begin, each generation believes that their challenges are unique, which in some ways they are. But your obligation to the world remains the same. Make it a better place. Leave it in better shape than your parents did. This is the responsibility you have inherited as the next generation of leaders. But it is not just an obligation. To me, it's a fantastic opportunity to get that unique satisfaction of having made a difference. And that leads me to my second observation. For you as a person, I believe the formula for success remains the same. It's outlook, attitude, and approach to life that matters in the end. So let's compare my generation, the famous 60s generation, with today's graduates. And it's pretty obvious that there are some different challenges. Let me just cite a few examples. Back when I was on campus, the Soviet Union was still seen as strong and dangerous. It was a bipolar world, but the United States was clearly the dominant economic power in the world. Today, the world is multipolar. In a sense, this is a much more democratic world you're growing up in. But at the same time, it's also a less stable one. Back then, our politics were dominated by the Vietnam War. In more recent times, two wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, have been the focus. And these wars, well, however terrible, American casualties represented just 11% of those lost in the Vietnam War. But the rise of terrorism directed at the West now makes the enemy less visible, the world more complex, and particularly the protection of civil liberties more difficult. Civil rights was the defining movement in the 1960s. My dad taught at the University of California at Berkeley in 1960, and I still remember people organizing freedom rides to fight segregation in the South. Today, America has a black president who supports same-sex marriage. Yet income inequality is rising, and social issues still remain the dividing line in American politics. The Cultural Revolution in China was launched in 1966. Its effects still are the centerpiece of China's politics today. In a few decades, for the first time, the largest economy in the world, China, will be a country whose per capita income is in the bottom half of the per capita income scale. This is a very unusual situation. The world has expectations of the role China should play in world crises, given its size and importance, but China, on the other hand, finds it odd that it should help bail out countries vastly better off than they are. The tremendous growth in real incomes in the developing world has been matched by a decline in the middle class in the West. Young people today are less certain about their economic future, Youth unemployment has reached 50% in some European countries. The world is still feeling the effects of the worst financial and economic crisis since the Great Depression. The United States is mired in a deep balance sheet recession, a stark contrast to the years of prosperity experienced in the 60s. Indeed, during the age of Aquarius, governments in the Western world were extending services and support to their population. The baby boomers were coming of age and entering the labor market, providing a boost to the economy. Now, in the age of austerity, Western governments face demand for services beyond their ability to pay, forcing politicians to do the one thing they cannot naturally do: make tough choices. The baby boomers have moved from a source of growth to a source of concern. How will governments afford them as they age? Technological advancements continue to produce boundless change and massive growth opportunities. They also have the technology change has brought the world closer together. Speed of change has accelerated. Look at the effect of mobile phones on the Arab Spring. So in a sense, the world has changed, and the defining challenges you face today are different than in our generation. My generation was more optimistic, felt more empowered, more confident in our ability to change the world. In protesting Dow's recruitment on the University of Toronto campus in front of this very hall, as my wife Fran did, or marching in Washington to protest the Vietnam War after listening to a provocative speech by President Nixon and feeling compelled to drive all night to Washington to make our views known, we accepted the power of society's institution, but stated our determination to change them. Today, the world seems more uncertain. Public institutions have lost much of their stature. Young people in the West feel less empowered to change the world and are more inward focused. The Occupy movement has captured the spirit of the times. Something is wrong, but the answer isn't obvious. But if life teaches you anything, it is that people find a way, both collectively and individually, to not only cope, but to exploit problems to make them into opportunities. To do so, you need to strive to keep a balance. Don't ignore risks and challenges, but don't overestimate them either. There are always opportunities out there, just find them. You need to stay positive, not just to be successful, but because life is just more enjoyable if you see the cup as always half full. You must be a leader. Clearly, today's world, with Western governments challenged, with growing economic inequality, with the world divided, needs leaders. You are among the luckiest people in the world. Lucky with the capabilities you've inherited, and lucky with the support that you have been given. But luck carries with it its obligations. I prefer to think of them as opportunities to grow, and one of them is to provide leadership. Now, leaders don't need to lead the world to be a leader. Leadership comes, in fact, in many forms. It's what they do and how they do it, not their role which defines leaders. Leaders help others be better than they thought they would ever be. They make their world, however big or small, better. And just as you have been lucky, there are many people out there who have been unlucky in life. And when you interact with them, be less judgmental and more empathetic. Change one person's life for the better, and you are a leader. And you will enjoy a pleasure that money can never buy. Leaders can also help our public leaders lead. Support those with courage and conviction, regardless of their political stripe. Help our leaders make those tough choices. Don't demonize our leaders, or let our leaders demonize their opposition. Civil public discourse is critical to building a better society. In forming your own views, I would urge you to resist attempts to make you an ideologue. Yes, demand change, but don't be formulaic. Being ideological is intellectually lazy. In choosing careers, do what makes you better, not richer. The second will follow the first, but over time, chasing short-term goals generally doesn't cause you to win in the long run, even in money terms. This is all the more important in a world of uncertainty. You should do the things you love and for which you have a passion. Find activities that you enjoy and that will build your capabilities and your experience. Always choose places to work by the people with whom you will work, by the values they hold, and the culture in which you will operate. You must travel, see the world. It's getting smaller, and an ability to comprehend the different ways people can see the exact same thing is essential. Diversity is a beautiful thing, but don't become a relativist. There is right and wrong, there is good and evil, and there are better and worse societies. And after you travel, come home to Canada and see Canada with fresh eyes, and thank those who brought you here. You are lucky enough to live in one of the most civil, open, diverse, and caring countries in the world. You should always do what's right. Now, this might seem like an obvious truism, but it's at the center of today's debates. We live in a world where moral code seems often pushed aside for short-term greed or gain. People say nice guys don't finish first. I believe the exact opposite. Rarely do I see where the bad guys really win. They may win the material contest, but they never win the happiness contest. Ask your parents or friends, what was their finest moment and the one that makes them still wince today? Their finest will always be the one where they stood tall and did the right thing, and the worst when they failed to do so. Don't take yourself too seriously. The world is filled with people caught up in me. It is a huge burden for them to carry. But it's an even worse burden for those of us who have to put up with them. Recognize and enjoy your own foibles, which leads me to one final point. You only go around once. The world is now turning to you, to your generation, to make it a better place. Do this in your own way, in your own time. But do this not for a sense of obligation, but as a source of satisfaction and as a way of defining who you are. You will encounter challenges that are unique to your times. Don't let the world's uncertainties overwhelm you. Your generation will find a way to thrive. The journey ahead is exciting, it's full of possibility and promise, obligation and opportunity. Enjoy the ride. But before you go, take the time today to hug the people who helped to get you here. You've already accomplished a lot. You're going to do even more. Congratulations and enjoy today. Thank you very much.